Hey there, y'all. I have another St. Patrick's Day book that I want to read because we missed St. Patrick's Day at school and I love these books. This one is called The Ring of Truth, and it's an original Irish folktale told by Teresa Bateman, illustrated by Omar Rayan. Okay, ready? Patrick O'Kelly was a peddler of scarves and trinkets with a habit of telling magnificent lies. Now, a peddler is someone who travels like pulling a cart and selling stuff. And he tells lies because he wants people to buy his stuff. He traveled from village to village, a pack on his back and a wild story on his lips, never telling the truth when a lie would do. Indeed, folks said he must have kissed the Blarney stone and caught a bit of it in his teeth, for the legend had it that all those who kissed the stone in Blarney Castle near Cork would be skilled in flattery or telling stories, lies. Patrick was proud and cocky about his stories, but his loose tongue proved to be his undoing. I'll make sure y'all can see the pictures. One day, he heard there was going to be a Blarney contest in the county of Donegal. The prize was a pot of gold. Naturally, Patrick thought he was the most likely to win the contest. "Why," he said, "I can spout better Blarney than the king of the Leprechauns himself." As you might expect, word of Patrick's prideful boast made its way under the mountain to the home of the Leprechaun King. Leprechauns consider Blarney an art form, and themselves its best artists. When the king heard of Patrick's bold statement, his eyes flashed green lightning. So was he happy or not happy? Not happy. Not good to brag. "That Patrick O'Kelly," the king told his followers, "he's fair puffed up with Blarney, thinking he's as good as any one of us. It's time he was taught a lesson." That night, Patrick O'Kelly lay down to sleep under an oak tree. But when he awoke, he was somewhere else. I wonder where he was. He was in a huge room with a ceiling that stretched out of sight and walls that were lined with gold and silver. Trees grew there with leaves of diamonds and amethysts, beautiful jewels. He heard a clinking sound and sat up. He looked around and saw that the ground was covered with gold coins. Wouldn't you like to be there? Patrick rubbed his eyes, thinking he was still asleep, but when he opened them again, they caught the sparkle of silver coins among the gold, and jewels as well. He started to slip some of the riches into his pocket when a trumpet sounded. Looking up, he saw the king of the Leprechauns on a golden throne being carried in by 4 tiny ponies no larger than dogs. This book has beautiful pictures. "Patrick O'Kelly," declared the king, "welcome. I wanted to meet the man with such a fine reputation for Blarney." "It is a great pleasure." The king sprang from his throne and bowed. Patrick arose and gave a bow back, but he kept his eyes on the Leprechaun King. "What is it that you want of me?" Patrick asked nervously. "Why, nothing at all," replied the king. "Indeed, it is I who will be giving something to you." "To your left, Patrick O'Kelly, you'll find a ring. It's yours as a reward for the way in which you spread your Blarney all over Ireland." Patrick looked and saw a gold ring with a single emerald, square cut and glowing. Emerald is beautiful green. "A worthy ring for a worthy man," he thought, placing it on his little finger where it fit as if it had been made for him. You see the ring over there on that blue pillow. What have I done to earn such a reward? Patrick asked. Do you think you're the only one who can talk Blarney? Laughed the leprechaun. That's no reward, but a punishment for your pride. You'll never take that ring off again, for it's the ring of truth. The man who wears it can tell nothing but the plain truth for the rest of his life. Now, let's see how well you get on in life without your pack of lies. That's what he gets for bragging about himself, saying he was better than the king of the leprechauns. There was a flash of light, and when Patrick O'Kelly opened his eyes, he was lying beneath the oak tree again. So 'twas a dream after all, he mumbled, and turned over for a bit more sleep. But something hard pressed against his cheek. He looked down, and there on his hand was the gold ring with the square emerald. So it wasn't a dream. Turn the page. Patrick sat up. He started to say, "It didn't happen. It isn't real." But what actually came out of his mouth was, "It did happen. It is real." The absolute truth, and only that. He tried to pull off the ring, but he might as well have tried to remove his own finger. It was stuck there, just as the king of the leprechauns had said. Neither soap nor struggle could remove it, and Patrick had the sinking feeling that his life was going to change, and not for the better. Because remember, he made his living selling stuff to people, and he told lies trying to get them to buy his stuff. Indeed, he was right, because from then on, everywhere he went, peddling his goods, he told only the truth. No longer could he lie to the ladies about how beautiful they looked. About how beautiful they looked in his kerchiefs and baubles. Kerchiefs are their little shawls or scarves, and baubles are the little jewelries and things that he sold. If they looked ridiculous, well, he had to tell them so. This was not good for business, because remember, he couldn't tell them they looked pretty if they didn't look pretty. He could only tell the truth. Worse, people who had suffered his peddling for the chance to hear his Blarney were now sore disappointed, and he was run out of first one village, then another. So it was that he found himself on the road to Donegal, where the reputation was still sound of his Blarney. He knew the Blarney contest was completely out of the question, but thought of the crowds who would attend. Surely he could get some of them to buy his wares, if only he could keep his tongue still and not talk. When Patrick entered the town, the streets were silent, for all had gathered at the main hall to hear the liars' contest. Curious, he decided to sneak into the back of the room and hear the competition he would have faced before his encounter with the Leprechaun King. But the first person who saw him, not having heard of his recent misfortune, sent up a cry, "Here's Patrick O'Kelly! He's sure to win!" Before he could say a word, he was being hustled to the stage, and soon found himself in line for the contest, unable to slip away. As the day wore on and the stories grew wilder and more fantastic, potatoes as big as mountains, changelings, magic harps, and enchanted castles. Poor Patrick O'Kelly. When the time came for him to speak, he knew he would be disgraced. He stepped forward and, having no choice, told the plain truth. "I'm sorry," he said, "I cannot enter this contest. You see, I grew so good at Blarney that the king of the Leprechauns himself was angry with me and took me to his kingdom beneath the earth, where gold and silver walls rise up forever, and the trees bear diamonds and amethysts. Why, the very ground itself is covered with riches, gold and silver coins and sparkling jewels." There was a hushed silence. There, the king of the Leprechauns himself came to me, carried on a little golden throne, pulled by 4 tiny horses, no taller than my knee. He got down and he bowed to me, Patrick O'Kelly. Indeed, I should have been suspicious even then. He told me he was going to reward me for the fine quality of my Blarney. A snort of disbelief interrupted him. I can see you doubt my word. How I wish I'd doubted his, for he gave me a fine gold ring with an emerald. Only after I placed it on my finger did he tell me of the ring's curse. "It's the ring of truth," he said. "The man who wears that ring can tell nothing but the plain truth for the rest of his days." "And so it's been since that day," Patrick O'Kelly continued sadly. "I cannot compete in this Blarney contest, for here on my finger is the ring of truth, and I cannot get it off, no matter how I try." There was a long silence. Then the room burst into laughter. "That's the biggest pack of Blarney I've ever heard," declared the judge. So they think he's made it all up. So, Patrick O'Kelly won the pot of gold. He protested, ever truthful, that it wasn't Blarney at all, but nobody believed him. So what could he do but accept his gold fortune? He had learned a lesson, however. With half the gold, he bought a plot of land and a wee little cottage, not tiny, but big enough for him to live in, a wee cottage, and settled down free of want for the rest of his days. The other half he laid at the foot of the oak tree as an apology to the Leprechaun King. Perhaps the king accepted his apology, for Patrick was often invited back to visit the Leprechauns. He wore the emerald ring all of his life, but never lacked for tales of the fair folks, which means the Leprechauns. Or perhaps the Leprechaun King was still playing a joke. For though Patrick often told tales of the time he spent in the magical kingdom beneath the ground, nobody ever believed him. Cute story. Bye.